the reason I love abstract is because there are no rules, much like graffiti. It was as open to interpretation in a way for me to get into abstract because I was inventing things like process-driven, style-driven person that I am. It fit perfectly.
I find that really interesting about how, with creatives and artists, how you draw a lot of inspiration from all your experiences. And for some people that there is a lot of cultural influence behind what they do because it's what they're familiar with, right? Yeah. Especially here in Australia, where their culture is something that they develop along the way, right? There's nothing, there's a lot of shared values from one culture to another, but there's not a lot of like anything tangible like rituals or an aesthetic or even any kind of practice like dance or cuisine that we can come together and say that's Australian, right? It's always evolving. So the art scene here is just such a mishmash and a motley crew of a bunch of different people with a bunch of different experiences, different cultures, and it's all just been shifting and constantly changing along the way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think those points are kind of a nice recipe for, a culture that is also isolated, like Australia and New Zealand in terms of, I'm just talking about art here, but it's so isolated that it's like, with, let's say, graffiti, because I know about that, but like a culture that, started on the other side of the world and has since then kind of blanketed the world. But, Australia and New Zealand have very unique styles and their own rich histories, in that scene, which like, I always say this, it's like, it's not like I've traveled so extensively that I know everything about all styles, not at all. But I can definitely say, like, everywhere I've been, the talent here, like, it's world class, like I think we have a lot of talent here that like stands up next to anyone, in the world.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like the street art here, because that's your background, isn't it?
Yeah.
You started from there, and you say at a time, let's say like in the 90s, that was when it was starting to like permeate into Australian culture and the Australian art scene. And a lot of that was really heavily influenced by what you saw over in America.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you can see how it's evolved now, where it's not even, I wouldn't even say graffiti. It's not graffiti anymore. It's street art. It's just art that just so happens to be out on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many evolutions of it now. I think like, I was probably like, I got here in 98, like end of 98 on grand final day, my first day in Australia. But different story. But like, I was still there for kind of, I guess you could say it was like the end of the golden era of Melbourne graffiti, but it was still wild, like from never having seen graffiti before, like my first actual introduction to the scene was probably when I had to take the train to school every morning, there's graffiti still on the trains, in the trains, like the lines were changing like every day, it was going off. And, at that point, like I was like a creative kid, but I never really thought it was a viable option for me to sort of pursue it moving forward. Like I always thought it was kind of a hobby.
Dude, at that point, it was not a viable option.
No, I mean, like my parents were obviously like, get a good job and all that type of thing. Like you can do your little hobby in your spare time. So that's what I thought it was, if anything, But I also didn't know what the fuck it was. That being said, like I see all these tags and stuff, and I'd just be like, what is this? Who does this? How do they do it? But I think that was the little switch, like I don't know what it is, but I need to try. I need to try and do this at some point.
So what was your first step into it?
By the time I started like getting into graffiti, like I said, it was the end of the 90s, like 98, 99. And, you know, as you do, you kind of just start like running with kids at school that
Yeah.
are also into tagging and graph and
Hoodlums.
what, yeah, type of shit, you know. And, you know, it was a funny thing because, like, admittedly, like, I was a really good kid, you know what I mean? Like afraid to get into trouble, like question the rules and stuff like that. Like, I was a good kid, you know. But I think like graffiti sort of just like opened me up a little bit and was like, you know what, it's okay to get into a bit of
okay.
trouble, you know. Like it's okay to kind of push the boundaries a bit and question things. And I started loving it, and I saw like what you could do with it, like the murals and the burners and the productions and all those type of things, which like again, I didn't know where to start, but I really wanted to do that.
Dude,
Like,
it's such a layered thing as well because it's not just the art, right? It's the whole.
yeah,
It's there's the freedom, right? Like you know that you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing.
yeah,
and
for
and,
sure.
and as a kid, when you have that
Yeah.
that leash, you're like, you know, you imagine it. You're like, and it's good. It's a good way of unleashing that imagination as well.
Yeah,
When
for
you
sure.
think, fuck, you know, we can start breaking some rules.
Yeah,
You know, you start breaking these little rules. Like I didn't even think about. I hadn't even thought about this till you know, we caught up. But when I was like 15, my dad bought me, because he had to. I was under
Yeah.
18. He had to go buy me export paint from like the reject shop,
yeah. Oh, man,
knowing
yeah.
knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
So then like we'll go buy some paint, and then he'll drop me off at my friend's place, and I'll, you know, be spending the night there. And his parents were cool with it too. And we're like 15, man. And
Yeah.
then, you know, at midnight, 1 o'clock, we'll get out and just start roaming the western suburbs and just, you know, throwing
Yeah.
shit up everywhere. And they're like,
Yeah.
how are parents okay with this?
Yeah.
But and I'm not saying that they should be,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I think it was a way of them encouraging us to, you know, explore that creativity, that space.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and I guess we're probably more vandals than
Yeah.
artists at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think for most writers, that's how it starts, and that's how it stays. You know, it's just it is what it is. You know, I think it's just like you said. You know, my parents, they weren't traditional in any means. You know, but at the same time, it's not like they're going to find out that I'm into graffiti and be stoked about it. Like, of course, they, you know, eventually just came to like they found paint under my bed and markers and this. Like, they're not, you know, 1 + 1. They figured out what's going on.
Could be worse. I mean, it could be worse things, you know.
It could be worse. And it was kind of just like, you know, it was, I'm pretty stubborn too. So it was just kind of like, I just remember I got to the point where it was like, you know, if you get locked up, we're not going to bail you out and this and that. And I'm like, all right, fine. But I mean, at the same time, like, would you rather me let you know what I'm doing, or would you want me to lie to you? These are your options. So I think like they kind of just turned a blind eye to it to some degree, but down the line, I suppose, you know, when they realized that my intention was not necessarily like vandalism, but creativity, I think that's when they started cottoning on to like, okay, well, maybe it's not that's so bad.
But then you see how things have changed and how things have evolved now, because, you know, back in the 90s, that was the scene. And that's how a lot of the artistry was cultivated, and how over the decades has evolved. And now you have these highly accomplished artists, world-renowned artists that are parlaying between doing murals up on walls, doing studio work. They're just artists, high caliber artists that, you know, that was their origin story.
Yeah.
So there's heaps of them going around. And so at some point you went from wanting to do, you know, you made the decision from doing street art to then doing studio work.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Talk me through that. What was that process like, and what was the catalyst behind that decision?
Yeah. So basically, from this to the start of that question, basically, like I finished high school. I went through uni doing graphic design, like straight after high school, I guess to just kind of keep myself busy and also keep my parents happy that I was doing something, you know. And I guess at that point, like graphic design seemed like the viable option for me. At that point, I knew I was a creative, but like I met I met Pudos at uni, and we were kind of in the same position at that point where we were like, we both loved graph and painting, but all our friends that we'd come up with had kind of, you know, put it aside. So we didn't really know anyone in the scene at that point. But because we met, like, we ended up just like painting and going out and painting like underground a lot, which kind of established our styles and stuff like that. And then, yeah, we started like getting our first like commissioned jobs eventually. Yeah, so it was like, that was the start. And I guess it led to me kind of putting my degree to the side and being like, all right, well, I'm still pretty young. Like, I'm going to see where this like commercial art thing leads me. So I started doing like, you know, obviously I was painting a lot of graffiti at that point, but I was also like, yeah, starting to do jobs, which, you know, good experiences, but like I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was like way underpaid. Like I wasn't charging. I didn't know what to do. Like I was doing things for free almost, you know. But at the same time, in my head, I was like, well, look, I'm actually making money as an artist. I'm using spray paint. Like this is it, right? Like this is what it's about. But, you know, you eventually just like, you know, just too many jobs where you're painting just like bullshit. You know, it was like, I remember my last job, one of the last jobs that I always refer to, and when I talk about this, is like, it's this giant wall of fruit and vegetables, you know, like I had to go into this fruit and veg in Fitzroy, and like, you know, I had to like start at like 8 p.m. when the shop was closed and then work until like 12 to 1 or 2 or whatever. And I was shit. I was like real slow, and like it took me like 2-3 nights to do it. I got like fuck all money. And I realized at that point, you know, I was just like, this ain't it, man. Like, you know, like this sucks, you know, like I'm not getting anything out of this, you know what I mean? Like, you know, financially, let's not even talk about that. It was crushing me, you know, like it was so boring, and like it just wasn't fulfilling in any way. So at that point I was like, okay, like I need to kind of separate graffiti now. I know I want to like eventually, I want to show art in a gallery. I want to like make paintings and things. But this was very much the start. So we're talking about like 2012, 2013 over here.
So that wasn't even on the radar until you went through that whole graffiti journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Like everything that I do now, like my whole studio practice now is quite firmly founded in graffiti. Like I wouldn't be here without it. It's as simple as that. And it's just like graffiti taught me how to be an artist, you know. And it's like, I think, you know, we can touch on this in a bit later, but like I think the great thing about graffiti is, like you said, it's this foundation for a lot of very accomplished artists all over, like in all facets of art. You know, I think it gives you a particular experience and a particular sort of approach that you can take into other facets and use.
It's because there's no rules to it, man. I think
that's probably what it is.
Yeah.
You know,
like you've decided that you are going to break the rules. Like the first thing is that you're already going to break the law, right? So once that is out of the way, then you're like, all right, well, if I'm going to break the law, what other rules am I going to break in the pursuit of wanting to create art?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, to be honest, I think like personally speaking, the reason I love abstract is because there are no rules, much like graffiti, you know. It's like it was as open to interpretation in a way for me to get into abstract, because I was inventing things like process-driven, style-driven person that I am. It fit perfectly.
Yeah,
you know?
no.
So
that makes all the sense. Now when you can form that link, that tether back to the graffiti style. But for sure, and I think that, you know, in the 90s when it was coming up, and I was saying that it borrowed a lot of influence from America, right? That's where it was all coming from. And then you can also see like how in Europe, like how it's just kind of taken off, and it's just, I don't know, man. There's some incredible artists coming out of there for the longest while.
Europe is an amazing place, and I haven't even been yet. It kills me, but like I will get there. I will. But I was saying, like, you know, how you take the inspiration here in Australia. You start off with the foundation of what do we know, and that's just taken from America.
and then you give it a bit of time and you put yourself into it, and then things start to shift and start to change, and then all of a sudden now culturally the street art landscape here it starts to have its own identity, because we were able to then just try different things and push the boundaries, and then from that you'll have artists like you that have kind of just come out of that and have gone on your own thing and have taken the lessons that you've learned from that and have just injected it back into the work that you're doing now.
Yeah,
and you can really see it, and you can see the progression from the very first time that you started in the studio, because there was still a lot of graffiti, actual spray paint work in there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, when I first started studio, all I knew was graph in terms of art, you know, so it was kind of like I tried to do that thing where you're kind of trying to squash sort of a graffiti style into the confines of a smaller canvas, which I found really tough. I mean, that's another interesting thing about painting graffiti or street art first, because you're painting big, you know, like you start off by painting quite large in a way, you know. So like squashing that down I found really tough, you know. It was like almost the opposite way. Like a lot of people would probably start, you know, in a studio setting or on a piece of paper and then find it really tough to go big, you know. So it was almost reverse by the time I got into the studio practice. Yeah.
So then it was just a matter of then finding what works.
Yeah, and personally, graffiti didn't work. So I kind of, you know, and you know, like this is just my opinion. It's like you go to Europe, there are some amazing graffiti writers that do heaps of gallery shows and they stay true to their graph style. It looks great, you know, but personally it didn't work for me. And it was also just because like, it was a feeling, like it didn't kind of feel like graffiti for me. Like I love how it exists on the street and stuff. Obviously that's where it started, but like, you know, you like walk around the corner and you catch a burner by like an artist like it that you like or whatever. It didn't have that same feel for me, I guess, like trying to put my artwork up in a gallery or whatever, like my graffiti stuff.
Yeah, man. Context of art is so critical, man. Just the way, it's not even just the art, it's the setting that you're going to be viewing it in. It's the environment plays a big part.
And it was an interesting part, man. It was like when I first started the studio practice, I was trying so many things. Like I was trying like graffiti, I was trying stencils, I was trying like, you know, like almost like still life type of stuff. Like, I think like an underlying part was always like decay and degradation of the streets. And, you know, like Chico will say the same thing in terms of his influence, which is also why we started collabing. But it was like I've always been kind of drawn to degradation and like, you know, bill posters and sort of like degraded surfaces around the city, like, you know, that had been kind of tagged over and buffed over and for years, you know, to the point where like all these layers kind of start peeling back. And I guess like they're kind of like organic sort of collages built by the city, right? So that was something that I always documented, and I didn't really know why. You know, my phone's always been full of those type of photos. They just always kind of engaged me to the point where I'd, you know, walk past and, oh, whoa, and take a photo of it. But I never knew why. I was just like, it just looks cool. But, you know, I guess like that sort of attention initially, yeah, like it's kind of what I rested on in terms of my studio practice. So what does that mean? I started like trying to paint that, you know, but it was like a still life, you know. And like I'm not a painterly person. Like I'm not a toiler. So that didn't feel right, you know. But then I kind of stripped it even further back, and I was kind of like, what do I like about this? And it was the layering of it all, you know, type and color and all these textures that kind of like intertwined and they build this image. So that's what I kind of took from it, and that honestly is like the cornerstone of my current style. Like I work in layers, you know, so it's like that's where it comes from.
And you've gone from doing street art, and you can see that it's refined so much that I would even call it fine art, what you're doing now.
Yeah.
With ornament.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
What I loved about that was that you just decided that I'm going to draw a line in the sand, and there's an evolution of the work, and you can see there has been a progressive journey, but you've decided that this is now going to be a tipping point. And there's not much of a difference between the work that you're doing now and the work that you did before you made that
yeah,
announcement. But it was a conscious decision that this is now, here is an evolution. That's something that you've done along the way. Every time you've released some works or you've exhibited, there's
yeah,
always been a lot of thought behind how you're going to present it, and then it will do its run, and then it'll shift again, and you'll change
yeah,
the ingredients up slightly.
yeah.
Slightly. It's not a reinvention. Tell me about tell me why there was a conscious decision to put that marker and saying that this is what the work is now.
Well, I mean, I think my first solo show was in 2017. It's a while ago now. And like that show was very much a test in terms of like, can I do this? Like, what am I, like, it was my first show. There's so many things that I would do differently from it, of course. But like, it was a very experimental show. I just wanted to almost prove to myself that I could produce a body of work and show it and be confident about it. So it was it was a stepping stone, I suppose. But it was like, since then, it's just like, yeah, that's the point of art, like constant evolution, And I think like I use the sort of pressure of a body of work or producing for a show to challenge myself into pushing myself into that next stage, And the same things happened with like the work from the last release. Like I have a show coming up in October, so I use that as kind of like starting point to ideas that I've been wanting to like put forward for a while. It's just like life happens, and you kind of you keep painting in the way that you're painting now and then, now here and now, because of course the commissions that you get or the work that you get, man, I'm spitting everywhere, like are relative to what your output is. So it's like you get kind of not lost, but you get in the grind where you're like, you're getting paid to produce what they see. So that's fine. But that's the thing, like the line in the sand, so to speak, is like, all right, look, I've had enough of this. I need to make some new work, and I need to do it now, in terms of just like, that's how I get to. It's just like I get bored of things. So it's like, to impress myself, all right, what do you have next? What do you want to achieve moving forward? How are you going to do that, aesthetically? It's always aesthetics for me first. It's kind of like, what do I need to work on? What do I need to lose? And of course, when you're a creative, refinement is just that, isn't it? It's kind of like stripping back the stuff that you don't need and kind of accentuating the things that already work.
That is probably the best way of you explaining your work, because if people didn't see the progression and the journey, they might not be able to see the relationship between what you're doing now and the street art influence. I guess I can pick it out because I can see this progression. But if you didn't know, it might not make too much sense, that journey. But you can see how you've gone from a lot of the collagey type mixed textures, and when you say that you strip back what doesn't work and you enhance what does work, that makes a lot of sense as to what ornament is about. I get that.
Yeah. So like, just in terms of, like, I guess, style's of course just like a bag of tricks, isn't it? It's just like a bag of processes and things that you've learned along the way and refined and used. And it's just like, not to say that the other styles that I'm painting in, like the collage style or whatever, are not going to be done again. Like I paint pretty intuitively. Like it's, I don't just paint for commissions or for shows. Like when I'm in the studio, like I'm painting to produce, right? So it's a feeling. Like sometimes I feel like doing a collage, and sometimes I feel like doing a more sort of sculptural piece, like the ones in ornament, for example. And at the moment, that is what I'm working on. Like, I'm really interested in that side of things and kind of, you know, like building on that. So, yeah, I mean, definitely there was an evolution with the works in ornament that I'm going to bring into the show coming up, and I'm excited about it. So I have to like run with that vibe, you know, what I'm feeling now. And yeah, it's like I just see a lot of opportunity to like take the, I guess like the sort of foundational idea of ornament, which is quite a sculptural style with like, you know, really pared back backgrounds, like flat backgrounds or just like a simple gradient. It's very palette driven, you know, like coming from not so long ago, I was like, I love color, but there was so much, you know, and it was kind of just like, that was part of the process of this new evolution of like, all right, like pare it back, simplify it, you know, like I love contrast, but it doesn't mean you have to use 10 contrasting colors. You can use 2, you know, and just like the way that I paint with blends, you get 2 colors that work together, and naturally the blend's going to give you 10 colors, but in the same spectrum. And it's just like, you know, like that's exciting for me. It's just like, yeah.
And a big part of your work is also just resigning to the process and just letting it happen organically.
For sure.
Without forcing it, you know, when you mix your colors the way that you brush, you're at the mercy of the outcome that you get.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a spontaneity is a huge part of it, you know, and I like it that way because it's like a constant surprise. It doesn't always work, you know, but when it does work, it's super satisfying. It's like, you know, you could be battling a painting for a while, but you get that one blend or that one sort of motion that works. And for me, that's the, you know, that's what I need. And I'll be like, okay, here it is. And then I can finish it, you know. And sometimes it happens the first stroke, sometimes it doesn't. And I just like, I sand it off and I start again.
Do you ever get that when you get the first stroke right?
Yeah.
And then you get the second one right and you're just like, oh, don't fuck this up.
Yeah, for sure. There is an element to that, you know, but it's just like, I guess when you are in that flow state, you just have to like...
Not even think of that. You can't even think of that. Just let it happen.
You're not thinking about it, you know. It's like intuitive painting. And it's like, I wish I could tell you that it's something that I get to just jump in and out of every day, but it's not, you know. It's like I can be at the studio. I can get in the studio at like 7 a.m. and not do anything till like 5 o'clock. You know what I mean?
Do you have a process to get into that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, there's things I can do. Like it's kind of just like, you know, music's a big part of it. Like creating sort of vibe around the studio. Like I found that like even though you've been to my space, it's like even though it's my own within a wider studio, it's like even just knowing people are around sometimes is a distraction. Like regardless of whether they're coming into the space or not. You know, it's like. Which is also why it's like I find when I'm spending a lot more time at the studios, usually in lead up to a show or something, once everyone leaves, that's when I get all my work done, you know, because I'm just by myself, you know, I've got music on or whatever. And, you know, I guess it's also a mix of pressure too. Like I do work pretty well under pressure. It's like it forces you into intuitive painting. Like you don't have time to question yourself, you just have to make marks. And I think like for me it's a good place to be because abstract is marks, it's just mark making.
Because your work is like, it relies, like what you're saying, right, it relies so much on just intuition and just letting go and just doing it.
Yeah.
If you just turn and rock up to your studio on a day and it's an off day, like, would you just be like, fuck, man, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to put that energy into the work. Or, you know, like you just had a shit morning.
Yeah,
like,
which happens, of course. You know, it's just like, you know, sometimes those days I'll just be like, look, it's not going to happen today. I'm going to go home. I'm going to do something else. But, you know, that's the other thing. It's like, I think, you know, as a creative, our favorite excuse is I'm not motivated, you know, like I'm not feeling it. Which, sure, it's valid, like it is an emotional sort of thing you're doing, but like it's also an excuse, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like when it comes to inspiration, like you kind of need to figure out what inspires you, whether it's like, going to the gallery and having a wander around, or, you know, like whatever you're interested in, I think you need to invest in that, because like if you're feeling kind of burnt out or uninspired, you know, too bad. It's our job. Like we have to kind of we kind of have to show up, and like anyone that goes to a job that they hate, they show up and do it. Like we need to do it too. Like that's what being a professional artist is about, you know. So I have to kind of remind myself of that too. Like, okay, like I do work for myself, and I can do whatever I want. You know, I can like go in and be like, oh well, I'm not feeling it today. I'm gonna go home and play Xbox. But is that going to help me tomorrow? Not really. So it's just like, you know, figure out what inspires you, and like lean into it.
So do you have any kind of like routine? Because I'm big on processes and routine. I think that for me, it's a lot easier to rely on discipline than it is on motivation. Like if I know that,
for sure.
You know, like having this podcast, for example, I know that if on Wednesdays I'm recording, Thursdays, Fridays I'll be editing, and then all the content. Like I know things are like largely scheduled, right? And then you know, when you're juggling the work that you do with household and family stuff, trying to get things as compartmentalized as possible, it helps me just get things done rather than just trying to wing it. I could probably wing it, but then it's hard to then set markers of whether or not it's been a successful day, right? So like I like to have a routine in place. Yeah. Would you do that?
I try.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I'll be the first to admit that, you know, even though I am someone that kind of rebels against structure, I definitely need some. So, you know, I can work on that. Like I do need to work on that, like writing things down more and kind of like, you know, adding a little bit more sort of structure and routine to my process. But yeah, look, there's definitely, it's not like I'm completely without it. Like for sure, like if I'm painting and I'm on a deadline, I'll get it done. Like I do have ways of, that only make sense to me, I suppose, to get the work done. You know, it's just like, but yeah, I definitely find myself kind of like relying on a little bit of pressure. I need it. And I kind of like it that way, to be honest. Like, because like I said, it does kind of put me in a place where I just have to work and I have to trust myself, which I do. Like I am at a point where I feel, you know, I'm a pretty confident painter in terms of like my output, you know. It's like, I feel like I do hold myself to high standards, and I kind of always do want more in that respect. So those type of elements, I suppose, like they do kind of come together when I need it. But routine wise, definitely need to sort of work on that. I do.
Man, I find it important and necessary for me to be able to be more present in my day to day as well. Because if I don't compartmentalize my day and saying that, look, by this time I need to switch off, then I'll constantly just be working. And it's just not a healthy approach. I know that it's, as a creative, it's not going to be easy to always be going in and out of, you know, wearing different hats. And, you know, to what you were saying before, you travel because you want to have that connection with different environments, with different people, with different artists, to get that inspiration. And you're always taking things in, right? Whether or not you're aware of it or whether or not you like it, you're constantly being influenced. And I know that there's a lot of artists that find it really hard to switch off, because you know, you've made a choice that your art is your life, that it's not something that you can always just clock on and clock off as you like. So I mean, it's just that balance between having that routine, having structure, but also just being at the mercy of, you know, inspiration was a strike, but you've got to act on it.
For sure. I mean, I think like what you said about being present-minded is a big part of it for me. Like, I mean, especially when I was younger and I was trying to navigate being an artist and whether it was the right thing or not, you can't really know. Like, you have to just go for it, really. There is a lot of unknown, and I think because of that, like, worrying about the future is like counterproductive when you're doing this type of thing. Like, you kind of do need to be present-minded and just take it day by day. And, yeah, I mean, I am definitely like a singular focus type of person. Like I get overloaded if there's too many things going on at once, and to the point where like almost like paralysis. You know, if there's, I know I've got all this stuff to do with tight deadlines, but I'm kind of like panicking. Which one do I start? Like which. That still happens from time to time. You know, I'm not gonna lie, and you end up just like sitting there like, you know, in this state of paralysis. Like you don't know what you're doing, and then the whole day goes by, right?
Yeah.
But
Your energy is put towards worrying
yeah,
about the things you need to do instead of doing those things.
right. But then you know, you kind of that's the point where I'm kind of like, okay, that's when I will be like, okay, look, just compartmentalize things, unpack things one by one, and yeah, that's you know where the structure and the routine sort of will kick in. It's like, okay, let's not panic. Let's just kind of, this is due here. This is like, what can I finish quickly? And then you start knocking things off one by one. And I think that for me is like me being present, you know, that's how I navigate my way through stuff like that. You
And
know?
if you've always hit deadlines, why even bother starting to worry whether or not you can hit the next one?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, sometimes you don't, you know, and it's like,
Then what's the big deal then?
that's
You know?
okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's like, you know, you're only human. You're going to like fuck up once in a while. Like, it's part of it, you know, like as long as you don't make it that a routine, you know, it's like you're going to miss a deadline once in a while. That's okay. Like, what's more important, meeting the deadline or making sure the work is as good as it can be? Like,
Yeah, you're putting your name to it.
yeah, absolutely. It's just like, you know, sometimes, okay, look, sometimes a deadline is completely non-negotiable. You have to have it done. But, you know, sometimes, you know, you got a day or two, you know what I mean? So, but look, in the end, it's about the work. It's like, that's the most important thing. And I think like for the most part, it's just like, if you get the work done to a really high standard, you know, the client is going to be stoked and they're not going to worry.
And just
too much,
communicate it
like-
with them as well.
Yeah.
It's like if they're, I mean, they
Communication,
understand.
of course, you
Communication.
know, but it's just like, I guess I try, you know, I just learn to stress less, you know what I mean? Like, things are not always as, you know,
Oh, they're never as
insanely
important as you think they are.
as-
They never are.
that's all up here, you know? So it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, I definitely switched into a more sort of present-minded way of being, I suppose, during lockdown. You know, I kind of gained a lot of clarity from that situation in terms of like how I operate, because you know, obviously things just shut down and slowed down so much. It kind of afforded me a bit of time to, you know, just kind of think about what I was doing, you know. And yeah, I mean, I guess like since then, I've definitely just like worked at my own pace to some degree, you know.
Oh, mate, you know how many people have come here and have just given a lockdown story? It has changed people profoundly.
Yeah.
The experiences and the lessons they learned through that time. You could almost just do a whole podcast, like post-lockdown podcast, about
For sure,
the life
yeah.
lessons that people have gained. And at the time, it was tough. But now, you know, a year or two down the track, we're given the opportunity to reflect and just to see the work that has come out of the time that we spent in lockdown. And to your point, how it gave you an opportunity to be able to be more introspective as well and to figure out your pace.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, we were all forced to stop. And for creative people, it would have been an opportunity for them just to really like, I need to have a good hard think about what I'm doing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was just time, you know, to really be able to just kind of like come back to yourself for a bit and, you know, minus the daily grind or like, you know, what we were doing just like day to day, it stopped.
And to
you
what
know?
we were just saying
Yeah.
about how like it didn't fucking matter. Like none of those things, like it was so built up in our heads, like all these important things, like they're not as important as you think they are.
No, they're not.
Yeah, you just take it all,
Yeah.
you take all of it away and it just goes on.
Yeah, it does, you know, and it's just like, you know, even if you fail or don't succeed, things move on. You can, you know, the next thing you won't fail at, you know, and like that's I guess how I look at things. It's like not to say that things are unimportant to me, not at all, but it's just like it's okay if not everything goes to plan all the time. That's just life. So, you know, I think like there will always be other opportunities and other things that come along. So I just remind myself of that, you know, not everything's going to work out exactly to plan, but that's okay because it opens yourself up to maybe a different perspective of things, you know, maybe it was meant to work out this other way, you know, I'm open to that. So
I use this analogy a lot because I've been thinking about it a fair bit, especially with my journey, about how, you know, with goals, the goals that we set, the goals that we create for ourselves is like a carrot being dangled in front of us. You know, we are going towards that, but along the way, we're never really going to quite get there because all these other things are happening. So the carrot's actually there, right here in front of us, but what it's actually doing is leading us over here. So where we end up is where we're always supposed to end up.
yeah,
We think we're going there, but we're not.
yeah,
Right. So, you know, you can see that with a lot of with your work, right? Like how you're now, and I would call your work fine art, but you wouldn't be in the position that you're in now if not for graffiti.
yeah,
And
nah.
they're vastly different expressions of work.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I think like where the work is at now, it's pretty, you know, it's pretty far beyond, you know, comparison to graffiti at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just like,
It's just the journey that you've gone on.
yeah, for sure. And I think it's just part of my history and I'm proud of it. But it's like, but that being said, I think it's also kind of interesting because it's like you said, you know, the work I was doing when I first started, you could tell he comes from that background, you know, from the way I was doing things with spray paint and that's what I knew at the time. Of course, like all that type of stuff has evolved as well. But one thing I do find interesting is it's like even with graffiti writers and stuff, a lot of them, not that I'd expect them to, but a lot of them don't even know I do the studio stuff, you know. But the one thing that I find kind of cool is like a lot of the times when a writer sees my work, sort of the gestural sort of motions of the blends and stuff, a lot of them will just be like, are you a writer? You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, you know, and they're like, I can see in the way you like do your strokes and stuff, it looks like tags, you know, which is interesting because like it is kind of a muscle memory in that way. Like it is like the way that I do the blends and stuff, like the gestural motion, yeah, it kind of is founded in like tags,
Yeah.
you know.
Give it some thought now. When you look back at your journey from street art through to the work that you're creating, how much do you think has been a conscious move and how much of it do you think has been subconscious?
What do you
Like as
mean,
in
like-
just the journey and the progression, the evolution. Was there consideration for not wanting to change, but just acknowledging that the change is happening versus just looking back and thinking, holy shit, look at what I'm doing now compared to where I'm at? Or do you look back at it and know exactly what you were doing at every point of the little micro shifts and doing it with intention or not?
Right. I think it's a good question. I think like, look, to be honest, I'm generally the type of person that just moves with it and I like to just let things unfold organically. So yeah, I mean, when I first started graffiti, was there an intention to sort of end up in a studio setting? Not at all. Like, I think like 15-year-old me would be kind of mind blown that I'm doing what I'm doing now, you know, like that would not even have been an option. So yeah, I think, you know, definitely around the time like I started my studio process, there was intention, but yeah, prior to that, no, not at all. You know, as it happens, like things start kind of kicking off a little bit. You start selling a little bit more artwork. You start getting invited to more exhibitions. And it's those little hits of like validation, I suppose, that kind of, for me anyway, shifted the, you know, that was like, okay, see you later to graphic design. Like, this is not what I want to do at all. Like, it definitely validated me wanting to do this. And yeah, again, like back to travel, like I went to the US in like 2010. And that was like, you know, I went to New York and LA with Pudos. And I think for both of us, that was like a really defining moment for us because, you know, we were still at the beginning of our like graffiti journeys, but we found ourselves like painting with all these people in the US that we only saw on the internet or like on blogs or like in graph mags and stuff like that. I think that kind of made that experience made it very real for us that like we can do this, you know. I mean, I started doing design internships after that trip, but you know, even those experiences told me like, as much as I learned stuff as a designer, the culture was wrong. You know, the thing I got most out of those internships, full-time internships for like months and months with no pay, you know, yeah, like I learned a lot. They were valuable lessons, but the biggest lesson was, nah, this is not for me. You know, the culture wasn't right.
I've had my foot in both camps
Yeah.
for the longest while, and I totally get that. The art form in itself is a completely different discipline, you know, with design. I think that's kind of why I lent so heavily into design and moved away from art was because you have that control.
Yeah.
You know, you can be really meticulous with the details. And there's pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
Where like with art, especially if you're doing abstract work, so much of it you're just resigning to the process, and the outcome you get is the outcome you get. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like it's perfect in its imperfection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But with design, you tend to overthink it and you tend to manipulate it and undo as much of the shit you don't like and keep adding things in, and you can keep on dialing things in. And the more you're doing of that, it creates a lot of room for negative talk as well.
Yeah.
Because then you start doubting yourself. You start second guessing yourself. And at some point you just have to draw that line and saying that this is it. And then you have to overcome that fear of then putting it out and saying that this is the final work, and you still aren't convinced that it is. Where with art, it's like, that's it, man. Like,
yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, yeah, I think that was part of the experience, isn't it? Like, and also, you know, you're working for clients for like, you know, in a commercial sense too. It's just like, no, this is better.
Yeah, it's like,
it's just
shut
like,
up.
No, it's not. But that's the gig, right? And I just never took to that. You know, I was just like, but it's not. You know, for me, it was just like, if I get to do what I do, of course, there's like all these other things you have to deal with, of course. But it's just like, I don't have to deal with that. I don't have to like work for anybody. I don't have to listen to anybody. My job as an artist, I suppose, is to also tell you that this is good. You don't have to agree, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's part of the job. Like, this is good because this is what I do and I believe it's good.
Like I put up that post, you know,
Yeah.
that quote was, art is for me, design is for them.
Yeah.
And I believe that entirely. Like when you create art, the only person that you need to satisfy is yourself.
Yeah. And as a
then-
creative, that's how it needs to be. That's how it should be.
That's how it
you
should
know?
be. But then with design, it's a bit different because you have to create and cater to an audience.
Sure. Yeah,
You know, it's a different purpose there. So no, I definitely appreciate the difference. And one of the things that I find quite interesting is how that there are career pathways that are drawn up very specific for designers, for a lot of creative disciplines. With art, it's really different. There's no actual established runway. It's get in there, fuck around and find out kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, like you've got to put a lot on the line.
Yeah.
And there's no one that's going to tell you whether or not what you're doing is right.
Yeah.
It is just constant moving and constant iterations and constantly having to tell yourself that you're on the right track when there's really not much to tell you that you are, other than just what you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
You know, there's very little guidance, there's very little structure.
Yeah. I think someone told me like this quote that resonated with me. Like, it also made me laugh, but you know, it was basically like, you have to believe in your own delusion. You know what I mean? Like, you really have to back yourself and believe that you can do this based on really nothing.
Yeah, that was
You know
that
what
was
I
the
mean?
basis of
And,
the conversation I had with
yeah,
Miss 180. She's a
yeah,
calligraphy artist, and
yeah.
we came up with this thing that's called being delusionally confident.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's like you have to be, it's like you have to believe that you can make something of this, or something's going to come through the door, because like you said, it's so unknown that, like, yeah, I mean, it's too much for a lot of people, like that unknown of not knowing what's coming next. Like, but I love that. I kind of actually love that part of it too. Like,
Well, I mean, like if you really want to reduce it down to everything, like we don't know what's coming up next, regardless of what we're doing.
exactly.
Right? Like you
right.
think you do.
So
but
why
you,
not?
Yeah, you do. But
So
you
why
don't,
not
yeah.
do this, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and that's the nature of creativity.
Yeah.
When you're doing art, is that the piece that you are going to create next, it's never existed before.
Yeah.
And the next piece that you do after that, as closely as you want to even try to replicate it, not saying you will, but if you try to replicate it, it's going to be different again.
yeah,
And everything that you're going to be doing from here on in is going to be different. So there has to be some kind of belief that you are able to create something that is unreal, because it is going to be the first iteration of its kind
Sure.
ever.
Sure. And like part of it is you question that too, right? From time to time, like it's just part of the process. Like, and I think every artist goes through that multiple times until the point, it's like, so I go through it a little, and it's just like, I have to remind myself, like, you've been here before, don't worry about it. Like, just keep doing it and you're going to make the breakthrough. It was just like, with the upcoming show, like one of the reasons I decided to lock it in this year after, I guess COVID kind of wiped out a lot of shows in that area anyway. But yeah, I mean, it just felt right. Like, it felt like I was excited about it. Like, I felt like these evolutions that prior to the one that happened earlier this year, they kind of came quicker, but it felt like a little while. And at one stage I was thinking, is it going to happen again? Is this it? But of course it's going to happen again and again and again.
That's it.
So you just have to be patient, and like you will make that breakthrough. Like, you never know when it's going to happen. It just kind of does happen, and then you run with it. So, all this like positive sort of affirmations, what I'm saying right now, that's going to fade away again at some point, and I'm going to go through all of it again. But I know I can get past it.
It gets easier every time.
Yeah.
With your first show, you said that you went in with the intention of wanting to challenge yourself. The point was to challenge yourself.
Of course,
with putting on a show.
Yeah.
The pragmatic components of putting on a show, you wanted to be able to then step up to the challenge of ticking all the boxes. With all the other subsequent shows and with the one that you have coming up, what's the intention behind it, or what are you seeking out of these shows with the next one? Do we have a name for it yet?
Not yet. I'm kind of still, I guess I'm still kind of work on the narrative behind it.
Yeah.
Like, I've got some loose ideas about it, but it's like, well, not loose. They're definitely like a little bit more thought than that. But I think the difference is with the first show, it was very experimental, and it was kind of like, proving to myself I could do it. And to some degree, it was like, if I put in all this work and like expose myself artistically and like invite people to come and, judge what I do, like, are they going to like it? And, because I was new, other people liking my work and all that type of thing was admittedly like in my head, I don't paint like that anymore. Like, I don't paint anything for like, are they going to like it? It's more about, do I like it? Like, I paint for myself, and I think like I'm definitely bringing that into the show, of course, but like in a more personal way, like it's less experimental. Like, I am kind of already to some extent established within my style and what I do. I know what I'm doing, but I think this one's more of a challenge in terms of like creating a body of work with more of a narrative, you know. Yeah, spontaneity and like freestyle and all that type of stuff are elements of my work, and they always will be. But yeah, like you said, I'm kind of developing more of a show with a broader sort of narrative, you know, like the pieces are going, you know, collectively, they're going to kind of touch on some things that I've been thinking about, you know, and that's what the show is going to be more about. So yeah, you know.
Yeah, with the first show, you know, there is going to be there's a lot that you're putting on the line. There's a lot you're entering into a lot of unfamiliar territory. There's a lot that's going to be unfamiliar.
Yeah.
No, it's not even just the work that you're creating. So it makes sense, especially when you're a bit younger, that you're seeking validation that what you're doing is right. You know, because there is so much that is, so much unknown that you want to make sure that this journey is the right one for you. And then over the years, you get that validation, you get that reassurance. And it's not even, and it's to the point where you're not even looking for it anymore, that you know here that this is the right thing.
That's also when you receive it, when you're not looking for it.
Yeah, right.
You know?
So exactly.
Yeah.
So you're no longer, that's not even part of the makeup of the work anymore. The work that you're doing is for you. So now when you're able to then focus on the work and, you know, when you say that you're now working on a narrative, and looking at where you're at with ornaments, that you've condensed it all down.
Yeah.
You know, that there is more of a focus on the work and on storytelling. And there will be a narrative because, you know, you have a more singular focus. So the work is going to be a bit more cohesive.
Yeah. I mean, I think like, like aesthetically, like, you know, ornament, there are kind of objects and, you know, they're like sculptures basically. I guess what I'm kind of working on developing more in terms of the narrative of the show, it's like, I guess I've been thinking about ideas of, you know, why we kind of imbue certain amounts of importance to objects, you know, and it kind of goes back to like when I was a kid, I used to love the idea of like finding treasure and like artifacts and things like that, to the point where I'd like, you know, dig holes in the garden, like looking for something, you know what I mean? And like in a more aesthetic way, it's like because the things that I paint, they're not perfect, right? Like there are imperfections to it, but when you like watch a documentary of like finding treasure in the ocean or like in a tomb or something, like even those treasures, like there are a lot of them are like so old that they're like smashed to bits and stuff, but there's still character to them. They're still beautiful, you know? And I think like that's almost like a sort of metaphor to life, right? Like, you know, and I think it's that sort of idea that I'm trying to attach to these paintings that I make, you know? Like, they're only as important as you want them to be, right? And it's like the other part to that is like, because I paint abstract, it's like I could paint something that means something to me, obviously, but you can look at that same picture and it'll mean something completely different to you. And like I really love it when people, you know, feel the need to tell me what they think it is or why they think it is. They're not wrong, you know what I mean? But like in the end, they've engaged with that piece and they've spent time and like reacted to it, which is like what we want, right, as artists. So yeah, I think those ideas of kind of like, you know, placing importance, treasure.
That's an interesting one.
Like,
that's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And that's another one that I'm wanting to explore a little bit, you know, with other guests, especially the ones that are working in the NFT space.
Yeah.
You know, when we have work that's created by hand versus digital work versus AI work.
Yeah.
And then you have something that is tangible like yours that you can hang up on the wall versus something that's digital in a frame. You know, how do you delineate the value of all those things? You know, like is yours more valuable because it was created by a person? Is yours more valuable because it's tactile, right? There are layers to it, there are textures to it, there's material, as opposed to something that's on an LCD screen. So it's it's interesting that you asked that question. Like, how do we give value to objects? Like, how do we do that? Like, where do we decide? And then at that point, how do we decide? How do we translate that value to a monetary amount as well?
Yeah.
Like, who decides that? You know,
that's what I'm interested in. I guess I'm kind of interested in the psychology behind it. And of course, it's like, with material possessions and stuff, paintings included. It's like, there's, for a lot of people, it's a status thing, or there's like ideas of nostalgia that come into play, right? Like with a painting, it's like, there's some, for example, like there are some pieces that I've done which are kind of like abstract renditions of like characters like Mickey Mouse or Garfield and stuff like that. And of course, like with something like that, nostalgia is a huge part of it, I'm just really interested in how all of those type of elements, especially in the abstract realm, kind of come into play. I like to play around with those ideas and, that's also why, like, I name all my artworks stuff. Like, I find it so funny sometimes. Like, there's so many amazing abstract artists that, like, they name their pieces, like, abstract 1, 2, 3. You know what I mean? And it's like, you actually have the opportunity to name it anything you want. You know what I mean?
Give it life, man. Yeah, give it a personality. Give it
look, each to their own, but I always just find that funny. I'm just like, man, I can name something anything I want. You know what I mean? And it's just like 1, 2, 3 is what it is. But the other reason I do that though is because like I think if you give something a name, it's also an opportunity like to give it a bit of character, right? Like, that the name could be where the nostalgia comes from. That could be where like the link to the person who views it.
Oh, it will totally influence it. It will totally influence.
You know what I mean? Like,
the way.
They like look at this thing from a distance and be like, "What's that? I don't know why I like it or hate it. What is it?" And then they read the title. It's like, oh yeah, like it's an opportunity to kind of like just engage the viewer a little bit more, for me anyway.
Yeah, it makes it a bit more real
as
well.
I mean, like, also you can agree or disagree, right? You're like, that's not Mickey Mouse. What are you talking about?
It's John.
Yeah.
It's Jeff.
Yeah, or it could be like it's Jeff, the neighbor that I fucking hate. You know what I mean? And also be the reason you hate the artwork.
Or you'd be like, hey man, I like Jeff.
Yeah. And then you could buy it because it reminded you of Jeff, I guess the thing that I'm also interested in is like all of those ideas are subject to change too.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to be open to change.
That's right, though. You have to be open to it. Right. They won't just change.
No, I think, what was that line? It's like, oh man, I'm going to butcher this. It's something like, hold your opinions high, but not too strong. I've got that completely wrong.
Yeah.
But I guess that the sentiment is if you believe in something, really just have conviction in what it is that you believe, but don't be tethered to it personally, right? Be willing to let go. Be willing to grow as a person. And having community, I think, is a part of that, because you are able to then listen and learn from other people, and then that will start to shape and shift organically, much like you will as an individual. I think it's important, man. Like, I've spent too much of my time being stubborn and thinking that I had all the answers. And, in retrospect, I didn't. I actually really didn't. I didn't even think to ask questions. And I think that's really important. I think it's important for people to be asking questions and to be challenging themselves, put themselves out of their comfort zone, especially as artists.
Yeah, for sure. I know what you're saying, man. I was definitely the same in a lot of ways when I was younger. I think in retrospect, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that, moving to Melbourne for me, was hard because like I was just about turning 13. I was a very different kid to the ones that I ended up going to school with. You know, I went to international schools my whole life. All my friends were international kids, you know, and going into like a very like traditional Australian school with Aussie kids, I didn't fit in at first, you know. So it was like, yeah, it was tough because it was a situation that I never really found myself in, I suppose. And then subsequently, like my involvement in getting into graffiti and stuff, like outside of the artistic creative aspect of it, like you know, it kind of allowed me to build myself up again and give myself somewhat of an identity that I could be proud of again or whatever. From, you know, basically just feeling pretty lost and like I didn't fit in, you know. And I think like when that started happening and I started like painting more and things as a younger artist, I sort of in a bad way like evolved these ideals that I, you know, I clung onto because they needed to be right.
What do you mean?
Like you know, for when I was like, you know, I guess building myself back up and graffiti was kind of instrumental in that because it kind of gave me something I was proud of and all that type of thing. But what I mean is, it was like the things that I'd learned, like, were sort of attached to my identity or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I needed them to be like right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I get you.
And of course, this is just like young thinking, you know. But like, if someone challenged those views, like, you know, fuck you, whatever. Like, I wasn't open to it being wrong, you know. And that's something that I definitely learned to sort of correct as I got older. Like, there's no shame in being wrong or like seeing something from a different lens. Like, it's actually going to reinforce your perspective as a person. But yeah, like that's something that I kind of learned along the way, I think, you know, like just being open, especially as an artist, you need to be open to things.
Yeah.
Because like all it will do is just kind of like, yeah, just reinforce your perspective and the way you kind of approach things, which you need to be able to do. You need to be able to adapt.
Could you imagine being at the age that you are now? I'm 40. Being at this age, and you're not far off it, I don't think.
No. Yeah, I'm nearly 40.
Yeah.
I'm 39 this year.
Yeah, and imagine if you were the same dickhead 20-year-old. You know,
Yeah, imagine, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
and there
but
are
to be
some people
honest-
out there like that.
Yeah, there are. But
God.
like, you know, like the thing is, like, if we wouldn't be here right now. With boundless. But we would not. You know? So yeah, look, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for those lessons, man, for real.
Yeah, no, with artistry, you definitely have to be. There's a high degree of vulnerability in it, and exposure. And culturally in society, I find it really strange how we persecute people that change their mind on things, right? Like that's the point. You know, that's the idea.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we are learning and we're growing. And if you're holding the same opinions as what you were saying, like as that, you know, that adolescent kid that came up in graffiti, if you were still that stubborn now, it's like, fuck, man, good luck to you.
Sure, but I think like the way those people are though, and how I was, maybe you were when we were younger, it's like those sort of viewpoints are rooted in like insecurity and fear, right?
God, yeah.
And fear, like that's why if someone challenges those ideologies, you get offended or scared, or like you need to puff your chest up or something. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's where it comes from. It's fear. Like people are always going to be like afraid of the unknown, and that's happened. You know, that's always happening. So you can see that like on social media. You know what I mean? Like someone does something that isn't right or said the wrong thing or whatever, and without even like, you know, considering what that person is saying, a lot of the time people like just jump on them. And like when, you know, 1,000 people jump on them, then 10,000 more jump on it because it's easier.
Yeah.
Like, because it's reinforcing that sort of mindset. You know, they're not actually like listening, you know?
Yeah, there's that tribe mentality as well.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
We can align with
you know, power and numbers, right? Like a mob mentality.
Yeah.
Like it's security, but it's just like, you know, if you're able to kind of just, you know, okay, what do I actually think about this? You know, sit down with it and unpack it for yourself and, you know, establish your own opinions. Like, that doesn't happen on social media, does it? It's like,
It doesn't encourage it. It does encourage it.
or
If anything, it
generally,
does.
really, like,
Yeah,
you know,
well, yeah, I suppose so. Like, it is just the social media is a bit of a distorted, but somewhat accurate mirror to how we function in real life
yeah,
as well.
absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like I
It is a
don't think
mirror.
it's necessarily encouraged for us to be vulnerable. That's definitely not something that the world wants to see. But even though it's essential, and you know, as an artist,
Yeah.
you have to be.
I think it's kind of funny, you know, like a lot of people that are vulnerable or very open kind of get labeled as like oversharers and stuff like that. And to some degree, they maybe are
Oh,
oversharing.
some for sure do.
But,
And
you know,
but dude, I also think that some of the people that are oversharing, that there is a lot of insecurity there. You
yeah,
know, that
there is for sure. Yeah.
Like if you're
You know,
if you're
it's like-
comfortable
yeah.
in the way that you feel, then
Yeah.
just be you. You don't have to. You don't even have to put it out there.
But you know, that goes back to a lot of things. It's like the more confident you are in whatever you're doing, it's like that validation you kind of, the external validation that I once seeked, I guess, when I was younger. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't really, we all do it to some degree, right? But at the same time, it's like, it looks different now. It's like, I don't paint to impress that artist I looked up to or anything like that anymore. It's like, I do it to impress myself. And then if that artist, for whatever reason, like sees it and likes it, sure, that's still validation. It feels good, but I wasn't looking for it.
Yeah.
And like I said, you know, that's when it comes, when you're actually doing your thing for yourself.
There's a lot of letting go that needs to come with that.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm drawing parallels between how to measure success and the work that you're doing. Is that, like, let's just say, to use that analogy, is like discard what's not working and enhance what
Yeah.
is. So what are the things that are going to be in your life that are going to feed back into this measure of success? And then the things that aren't, why do we even need it?
Yeah. I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, in context to like what I'm doing now, travel's huge, you know, like just experiential value that you get out of travel is like, it's nothing else, you know, and it's like all of that goes directly back into my creative output. So I need to invest in that as much as possible. And that's what I'm trying to do.
And it's a big permanent shift as well. You know, when
Yeah.
you add, I mean, every experience contributes back to you, but something as drastic as a changing of environment, being immersed in a completely different culture, different language, different food, different people.
Yeah. You're
Different
out of your comfort
everything,
zone.
completely out of your
Yeah.
comfort zone.
And that is, it can be an intimidating thing, but like the more you do it, the less intimidating it gets.
Completely necessary as well for everybody.
It's like, yeah, man. I mean, it's like one of the most powerful things you can do, travel. Just like immerse yourself in different things and like be out of your, like being outside your comfort zone is like, yeah, it's so important. I think like if you look at the sort of, you know, working for yourself or in a creative way as well, like it's not comfort zone. It's like you are kind of on the outskirts of a comfort zone and that's your life, you know?
Yeah.
So kind of like doing things like travel that kind of challenge you makes your day-to-day easier because you're more used
It's
to
just
it.
normal.
Yeah, it becomes your reality basically, right?
Yeah. Would you say that one of your drivers then is just to remain on the outskirts of comfort, is just to be at the point where you're constantly pushing what that looks like and what that feels like?
I mean, if I think about it, it's kind of like I've always somewhat existed there in a way, and it's just been normal for a long time. Like I guess it also just goes back to, you know, growing up all over the place and just feeling like you're going to move.
Yeah.
You know, you're not staying there. So I've always felt like I've kind of like been in that realm anyway. So maybe there is just like a level of comfortability for me there.
Yeah, maybe it was just a matter of you trying to find that anchor just within yourself then, rather than trying to ground it in the environment, that you just have to, there's that reliance on you to be the
Yeah.
anchor for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like to some degree, it's like one thing I actually do love about what I do is that it's relative to actions. It's like it's very simple. It's like if I slack off, I don't get paid, and I make life difficult for myself. And if I work hard and I chase opportunities and make things happen, then I'm doing well, and I can kind of continue to do what I want to do. And life hits you really quickly sometimes. I can slack off and then I'll be like, okay, you gotta get your head back in the game. Like reality checks constantly, and I'm not like, I don't have anything to fall back on. It's up to me. So yeah, like I like the fact that we have to navigate this game the best we can. And yeah, like a lot of the times you're not doing the best all the time, and it hits you real quick.
That's a really interesting thing
Yeah.
about being an artist.
Yeah.
Is that there's so much agency with where you go dependent on what you do. And it's not even just about like churning through the work and having to be constantly working. It's a lot that's asking you to have that assurance and to continue pressing on even when shit's not working out.
Yeah, that's all you can do, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like I was always full time, like I had like casual jobs. I had like jobs that kind of, let's just say, kept my head above water. You know what I mean? Where like they were good, and they on one hand, like they allowed me to pursue what I was doing and get to where I'm at now. But at the same time, like I noticed that it became kind of a hindrance in a way because I got used to that paycheck coming in. So it made me kind of lazy sometimes, and I realized that eventually I had to kind of rip the Band-Aid off and quit that job and just jump in, because otherwise I would have just been in that loop the whole time, like for too long. So this holds me accountable, basically,
That's a really, really good point. That's really interesting to think that how much of our society is complacent because of that, because of just the machine keeps turning.
Yeah.
Whereas that, once you've decided to pursue a creative or an artistic endeavor, then it's like, right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, speaking with Nathan Nankervis, he had one snippet that's really stuck with me. And when he said that, when you finish uni, this was from his personal experience, when you finish uni, you decide that you want to be an artist. So you put that intention out there, but there's so much growth that needs to happen between where you are now and where you want to be.
Yeah.
And then life just throws everything at you. And you think that it's not going your way, but it's actually giving you what it is that you asked for.
Yeah.
So it's in those moments where you're like, fuck, this is, I need this. I need this now. It sucks, but I need this to be able to get to here.
For sure. It's funny because it's like, I remember my first year at uni, I was fucking shit. I was doing graphic design and stuff, but like, I got into the course or whatever, like Viscom. And my first year at uni, like, I was pretty fucking cocky, like I thought I was really good for whatever reason.
Every first year uni student.
Right? But the funny thing is, you talk to people, and it's like always the same shit. Like they always like, yeah, I thought I was really good the first year. And then by the end of the second year, you're looking at your folio like, holy shit, I'm trash. And then the third year, you're like, you're just kind of like, oh, fuck, what am I doing with my life, But like, it's kind of funny because it's like, the longer you stay doing this stuff, it's like almost like the more you question yourself. But that's because your standards are higher, But I just find that transition really fucking funny, like how arrogant you are sometimes when you start, and then like, life happens and it just smacks you up a little bit, and you're just like, nah, bro, you're not good.
Yeah.
You're not good.
When you know very little, you tend to think you know a lot.
Yeah.
And once you're starting to get into the world, and you get humbled quick,
Straight up, man.
real quick.
Yeah.
So right now you're working on this up and coming exhibition in October, which gives you what, about, what's that, 4 months?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a couple of things on. The big one is the show, obviously, but it's just like I have. It seems like I have this thing that I do where I have, before a big body of work is due, I like to go traveling for some reason, and just cut time away from it. But maybe that's me kind of initiating the pressure. I don't know, but yeah, like that's a big one. I've got a couple of little bits and pieces to kind of get done between then as well, some commissions and stuff like that, which is sick. But yeah, Mongolia in the beginning of July with Hisco, and like, yeah, big Hisco is like organizing that again. And I'm going with two of my other two really good mates as well. So looking forward to that for sure. Yeah, there's stuff to do for sure. Yeah,
So
cool.
where are you at now with the planning of the exhibition?
Well, I
Still
mean,
developing the concept of it.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look, the thing is, like, I guess the way that I work, like, to some degree, there's a lot of post-rationalization too. Like, it comes together as I prepare it, you know? Like, I'm not the type of person that has, like, one solid idea and then just paints towards that. Like, I find that too, like, restrictive. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of prefer to, like, have a base idea about something, and then kind of like, whilst I'm making the work, it'll come together and the whole narrative will kind of come together with it.
It's so reflective of your actual work. If every single piece is just you resigning to the process, and then you've given yourself a date saying, I'm going to have an exhibition at this date, and then you almost have a literal blank canvas now,
Yeah,
and then you're
yeah.
like, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
And you just start experimenting, and then, like you were saying, it comes together.
Yeah.
And then by the end of it, you have this body of work that tells
Yeah.
this particular story.
I think that's more, it's more interesting to me. Like, I actually love that process. Like, I like leaving it a bit open-ended, because, like, for me, like, if I do it that way, like, I might have this great idea, but by the end of it, it's going to be even better, you know, because I kind of let other things kind of come in to play, and which I wasn't aware of, you know. Like, those are the little bits that make the show too, and make the work.
Yeah, man. You still got,
You know.
life to live and things to experience along the way.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, where can people find you, connect with you, reach out to you?
Yeah, usual spots. I mean, like, I got website, sahilroy.com, Instagram, Sahil Roy _. Those are the two main ones.
Dude, this has been such a kick-ass conversation, man.
Oh man, yeah, yeah, man.
Thanks
I
for
could
jumping on board.
I can talk about this forever. So, you know, it's been good to come in and have a chat. So yeah, thanks for having us.
We'll have you back on again, either just before or just after the exhibition. I think there's a lot that we can unpack. Like we've talked about right now at the genesis of the exhibition. It'll be really interesting to continue this conversation post exhibition.
Yeah,
and
man,
just to
for
wrap
sure.
it all up.
Yeah, for sure, man. That'll be sick.
All right,
Yeah.
dude. We'll chat then.
Awesome. All right, man.